you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there, ladies, things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. For over 16 years, going on 17 with over 2,200 episodes, we bring you the Chris Voss Show. All the smartest people have been on the show. The CEOs, the billionaires, the White House presidential advisors, Pulitzer Prize winners, all the people sharing their journeys, their stories, their lessons of life that you can learn to improve the quality of your life. And if they don't improve the quality of your life, don't make me pull the car over and come back there, folks. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all the crazy places on the internet where they do the crazy posting of things. I don't know what that means anyway. It just sounded cool in my head at the time. So we have another amazing young man on the show. His latest book is called Next Level Sales Coaching: How to Build a Sales Team That Stays, Sells, and Succeeds. Matthew Hawk is on the show with us today. He's a PhD, a coach and trainer. We're going to get into some of the details about him, and he's going to tell us more about himself. Welcome to the show, Matthew. How are you?
Chris, I'm doing well. It's great to see you again.
It's good to see you again, too. And give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on those interwebs in the sky?
Sure. My website is Matt, with two T's, matthawk.focalpointcoaching.com. Mm-hmm. My email is mhawk@focalpointcoaching, and you can always find me on LinkedIn under Matt Hawk, PhD.
So give us a 30,000 overview of your kind of bio rundown on you, too, and then, of course, what's in your new book?
Oh, thank you, Chris. So I've been coaching business people for about 25 years, mostly in sales leadership, but I've recently pivoted to CEO coaching, small to medium coaching for professional services firms. Mm-hmm. But going back to the book, my partner and I, Steve Johnson, co-author, have coached thousands of salespeople and sales managers over the years at a lot of big companies. And, we believe selling is a noble profession. Even though there is a negative stereotype out there, we believe in ethical consultative sales, and sales managers are pivotal. But a lot of them don't really have good role models coming up as salespeople. So we wanted to give them a practical guide.
I mean, it's funny to me how sales, I grew up with that same sort of stigma. Oh, I don't want to sell. It's, rejection is painful, and, asking people for money and blah, 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 blah. But we're selling all day long as human beings, each other, to ourselves and to other people. We buy cars that sell what our image is. If you got married, you're probably selling each other in the relationship, or at least one of you was, the benefits of getting married and building something. You were selling them on the features and benefits. Sometimes, I've had people selling me on why their dinner they made is so good. What they put into it, and we're all selling each other like all the time, and selling ourselves too all the time. Which reminds me, you can find Chris Voss on OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding. We're not over there. Don't do that, folks. They do have podcasts over there that aren't normal OnlyFans podcasts, which is kind of interesting. We looked at them one time. They invited us, and we're like, yeah, I don't really think this is for us. But there's still time. That's my backup. There was the Thunder Down Under show of the Chris Voss on OnlyFans.
Perfect.
Anyway,
I can see it.
We've sunk that joke as far as we can probably go. But it's just one of those things. And so you guys sat down and wrote this book. What was kind of some of the proponents behind it?
You can almost tell a successful sales manager by looking at their calendar, because great managers have a cadence of meetings, either one-on-one or group meetings, in which the magic happens. And that's what we do in the book, is break down all those different types of meetings with agendas and so forth. But the upshot is you create a team, both as a group and as individuals, that they're motivated, they're inspired, they feel supported by their manager, and they're continually getting feedback on their performance. So managers who manage to create a cadence to follow to make those things happen can count on being successful.
And so you guys help teach them those components and how to make things work. You know, I mean, we've all had the bad sales manager. We've all had the bad sales teams.
Yeah.
You know, I might have been the bad sales guy when I first got into car sales. I remember this story's in my book. They almost fired me. My sales manager came to me one day and he goes, "You're not going to make it more than a couple more days. And you need to learn to sell. You need to learn to close." And he goes, "Look, I know you're a broke kid. I know you don't have a lot of money. You're living on ramen and you're trying to make it as a kid." He goes, "I'm going to give you $10 to go buy Zig Ziglar's book, The Secrets of Closing the Sale," I think it was.
Sure.
And he goes, "But you can't spend this money on going and buying a burger. You got to go buy the book. And I need you to spend the next 2 days at night consuming this book and learning how to sell because you're on the list to go." And I was like, "Thank you." I didn't realize at the time it was the greatest gift that probably anyone would give to me, one of them. And so I went and got the book, consumed it, and the rest is history, as they say, I suppose, in some way.
Chris, I'm really curious. Do you remember any specific adjustments you made?
I wasn't closing. I mean, there was a lot. Like, just opening Zig Ziglar's book was like, you know, I knew how to shake hands and be friendly and stuff and try and... I knew how to sell, I knew how to do features and benefits of a product, and so I knew how to sell, but I didn't know how to close. And that was the big problem, So a lot of guys can do that on dating and when they meet girls, they know how to sell. I bought her a drink. Now what?
Now what?
Like, well, you have to close. You've got to ask for the number. Otherwise, nothing actionable is not going to happen. And so that was my problem. I just wasn't closing, and so I knew how to read the features and benefits charts. So I don't know what you think of that.
Closing there's a lot of mythology around closing the sale.
BC, always be closing.
Yeah, a lot of mysticism.
Yeah,
but I will tell you, there's a simple, very, very powerful thing that people can do. And it doesn't matter if you're a counselor, a coach, a parent, or an ethical salesperson. Mm-hmm. And that is, after you have helped the person verbalize all their pain and the gap between where they want to be and where they're going to be in the future, you summarize it back to them. Just give them all the reasons they gave you and said, "What do you want to do?" And that's the best close ever.
Oh. Because you're speaking at the things that they want to achieve, and you're helping them achieve their goals. You're feeding back to them, their goals and how they want to see themselves or feel in the future.
Exactly, and
the decision they're making.
That's right, and they need to verbalize it. Like a good counselor.
Yeah.
If you go to a mediocre doctor and say, "I want to quit smoking," he might say, "Do you want the gum or the patch?" It's medically correct. But if you go to a really good doctor and say, "I want to quit smoking," and she says, "Really, that's interesting. How long have you been thinking about quitting smoking? What got you started? What have you tried in the past? Take me forward 5 years. If you quit, what does it look like? And what does it look like if you don't quit?" "Well, Chris, I understand why you came to see me today. What do you want to do?" Mm-hmm. And that physician is going to get a lot better, treatment compliance and get sued less frequently for malpractice than the one who says, "Do you want the gum or do you want the patch?"
Yeah. That's my pickup line at bars, too. You want the gum or the patch? Whatever that means. But, the rule we came up with, and I think I learned this from the car business. I think there was a sales guy consultant that showed up, and he taught us this rule. But the rule is that we used to have with our employees that sold was you ask the client the first question in your mouth after you "Hey, how you doing? You have a good day? Okay. I see here you were interested in having this issue resolved, by this, whatever." The key was asking people, "What are you trying to accomplish?" and shutting up. In our case, our number one business was a mortgage business. People would just go, "Well, I want a 30-year mortgage and I want $5,000 cash out and a good interest rate." And that really doesn't tell you a lot of motivation of what is behind it.
Right.
And so we'd say, "What are you trying to accomplish?" "Oh, I need the $5,000 to put my kid through college," or "Oh, we were going to expand the house because we've got a baby on the way." You start really finding out a whole lot more about your customer, what they're trying to achieve, and by doing so, you can, sometimes you can modify that. There were times where I'd sit down with the customer and be like, "I see what you're trying to do here, but if you don't mind, I'll give you advice, and you can do either one. But my advice would be to do a 15-year mortgage if you're concerned about paying this down faster and, achieving these results and yada, yada, yada. And then, you show them the math of how you can accelerate it. Or one example was a lot of people, they wanted a 15-year mortgage, so they pay it off quicker. Right. And you say, you really can't afford that, or you can't qualify for that, or it's going to put intense pressure on your finances. But if you do a 30-year mortgage and you just make that extra payment and have that discipline, or half payment, you will essentially have a 15-year mortgage. And they'd be like, oh, now whether or not, their wife didn't spend all that extra money at Target is their problem. But, listening to the client and understanding what they want and having them understand that you empathize what they want is paramount. Would you agree with me there?
Absolutely. And they need to verbalize what makes those goals important. Yeah. Right? Don't be satisfied with what they want. Yeah. Find out why that's important to them. Because when people flag or they have objections, that's where you got to bring them back.
Yeah. It's the reason I want to buy a Porsche is because chicks dig it, and I'm single. So thereby, give us a little bit of history of yours. How did you get into sales? How did you get into coaching and helping people and down this road?
It's a little bit of an unorthodox story. I got my PhD from Yale University in theology and religion. Mm-hmm. And I taught for a couple of years. I thought I would spend a career in teaching, but I was following my wife around the country. She had a very successful career, so I ended up going into sales. Oh, wow. And then from sales, I went into sales training and now CEO coaching. And sometimes people say, isn't that a stretch? And I said, no, it's all the same thing. It's all about selling intangibles. And I think the other thing I gained from that education is, consumed books by some of the greatest minds trying to persuade you to agree with them. And you learn a little bit about rhetoric and persuasion going through all of that.
Mm-hmm. And so you were chasing your wife around. Evidently she was trying to run away from you around the country.
Maybe.
Is that what's going on there?
It's possible.
Yeah. And we do the jokes here. And that's what happened in my first 5 marriages. But so you learn sales. And then at what point do you start teaching other people and getting into that?
That was about 2001. Mm-hmm. I joined a consulting firm, and we had a couple of real big projects in the first few years, 3,500 salespeople at AOL, if you remember those days, with the ubiquitous CDs laying everywhere. Mm-hmm. And we also had the national sales training contract for Morgan Stanley. Mm-hmm. And so those were huge projects. And I was apprenticed into the trade. College teaching is not the same as teaching adult learners sales skills. So it was really challenging for me, but apparently I made it through the audition.
You lived.
I lived.
That's all you need to do. I mean, that's how
I lived. And I want to give it.
That's how I made it through, learning sales and stuff. I lived. Somebody cut me a break. So
you survived. And on that note, I want to give a shout out today to all the folks who are listening who, if you have a son or a daughter or a niece or a nephew or a spouse or a friend or a neighbor who's running a professional services business, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, and they're stressed out and they work too much and they're not making enough money and they're not sure how to scale the business or how to exit the business, mm-hmm. I would love to talk to you, because those are the types of folks that we help.
So in the book, I think you mentioned you had a few stories you wanted to tease out. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd like to share a couple of thoughts and then a story or two. Mm-hmm. So one thing that happened about the same time we published our book is that the Gallup organization published a book called It's the Manager. And they were trying to analyze employee engagement. Mm-hmm. And they determined that of all the factors in the workplace, the one that impacted employee engagement more than anything else was the manager. In fact, 70%. And so, Chris, I'm sure you can imagine what the impact is if employees are less engaged.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to communicate well. They're not going to trust each other. They're not going to collaborate as well.
They're just going to watch YouTube and TikTok videos.
And we also know that when it comes to success, about 85% of it is interpersonal skills. So we always start engagements with DISC assessment and EQ, emotional quotient assessment, because it helps people understand, what are their communication styles, what are the strengths, what are the opportunities, and it also helps people recognize how they might be able to adjust their own styles to be more effective with others.
Emotional Intelligence seems to be the thing that CEOs really need to have today. It seems like we've turned the proverbial corner on just barking orders to people and telling them how it's going to be. And, now and I think it comes from kind of more millennials, but then also Gen Zers. And these Gen Z people, they want to be able to get more, they want to emotionally connect more, maybe is the right word, to their jobs. They want it to mean more. They want it to be a part of their thing more. It's pretty interesting how it works. And it seems like as a leader, you've got to be more about the carrot now than about the stick, right?
I would think so. And that starts certainly with understanding. Mm-hmm. We have different goal areas of our lives, right? Different dimensions that make us feel good or not so good at any time. We've got physical health and mental health, financial, we've got career, we have friends and family, recreation, vacations, or whatever it is. And it is a great idea for everybody to spend some quiet time now and then thinking about, how do you feel you're doing in those areas? Mm-hmm. And, is there a vision of maybe some things you'd like to change up or improve? So that's one thing that I applaud the younger folks for, is that more holistic approach. I think it's a lot healthier than, the man in the gray flannel suit taking the train downtown every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's, being connected to something you love makes a difference when you show up. And like you mentioned that a 4 book, a lot of people leave companies off poor leadership. And, if you manage them well, mishandle them, they don't feel like they're being fulfilled, they leave. It's kind of a big deal.
Absolutely. And in the Gallup book, they found that 63% of companies, their coaching process, it's either random or it's informal. It's catch as catch can. And that's that lack of cadence that I was speaking about earlier. And if managers, Mr. Manager, Ms. Manager, if you're listening, you don't necessarily have to transform your attitude. Just schedule these events at a consistent intervals and run the meetings the way they're supposed to run, and you will build empathy, you'll reduce turnover, you'll get people to be recruited to your firm, and you'll get more consistent performance. Yeah. It's not complicated, but it's got to be done consistently.
Yeah. And you got to, emotional intelligence is not an easy skill to develop, I think. I don't know. I never thought about developing emotional intelligence. I think it just kind of came there as a form of where I developed too. And I could see that, you watching leaders, studying leaders, you could be a better leader by taking care of people. But I think it takes some depth to really plumb that, and develop emotional intelligence, wouldn't you say? It
takes some work. Fortunately, there is science behind it. It's not just all good feelings. And one can learn to recognize not only one's own communication styles, but others, so that you can make those adjustments. There's a great book called Surrounded by Idiots that, we think we're surrounded by idiots, but in fact, we're just not recognizing the ways that they prefer to work. And so a CEO or anybody else, you can raise your EQ score if you want to.
Mm-hmm. You can be on Twitter and be surrounded by idiots. That's all thing on social media. We like to kid the Twitter. And I'm going to call it Twitter until, I don't know, something better comes out of it, but I doubt that's going to happen in this space. I miss the old name Twitter. I mean, what a great brand. Well, it wasn't that great brand I ran, but it was kind of fun while it happened. What are some of the techniques and teachings or courses you offer for your sales coaching and sales teams, et cetera, et cetera?
So some of the techniques, I'm talking about this cadence of meetings, and I can describe a couple of them. Mm-hmm. Certainly there's an annual review and plan meeting where you're going to look back and look forward and set goals. Mm-hmm. Number 2, there should be regular one-on-one goal setting meetings. It could be once a month, or it could be once a week if you have very short sales cycles. Mm-hmm. Check-ins are informal conversations, but they're deliberate, right? They're not left to happen randomly. They're planned and executed. Another type would be performance feedback, where I'm actually observing the salesperson do their job. I could be with them in the field. I could be listening to a recorded call or a Zoom call, and I want to give them specific feedback, and when it's necessary, do some practice training, some rehearsal, so they can get better next time. And then the last two are sales meetings, which are done with a group. That's probably something that happens once a week. The agenda should be really uplifting. It's not a sales beating, it's a sales meeting. Everybody contributes. Pete, sounds like
It's
you've
not a
been in some
sales
of those.
beating, it's a sales meeting. I've
That's
been in
right.
those sales beatings. We referenced Glenn Ross earlier.
That's right.
With the, yeah.
I rewatched that film the other day, and
Isn't it so great?
it is unbelievable. And then finally, the last thing are sales huddles, which would be shorter duration, 15 minutes maybe, and so forth. And so that cluster of meetings, when they're done effectively on a regular basis, are going to produce success for a sales team. Now, in the CEO world, like coaching, professional services, there's still a cadence. It's the same principle. It's just somewhat different types of meetings.
So you sit down with them, and how can people onboard with you? Do they reach out to you? Do they have on your website, do you have a thing that they can talk to you on?
Yes, we have a process where we first of all talk for 20 minutes of some initial discovery, and if it feels like a potential fit, then we'll have the client take the DISC assessment, and we'll do a strategic business review. It takes about an hour. And usually by that time, they're in a real good position to say, this feels right, let's move ahead, or not. Maybe they want to wait. And then typically we'll meet with them once a week to continually clarify the vision, prioritize goals, brainstorm and execute. And then sometimes along their way, there's some group training or a focus in a particular area. But business coaches are not consultants, they're coaches. So I don't tell you how to run your dental practice, but I work with you to figure out how to improve it. There's a gentleman that just enlisted with me yesterday, and he runs a great plumbing business in the area. And before the pandemic, he was doing great. He had 12 employees, and now after the pandemic, he's got 3. He's 63 years old. He doesn't want to retire. But he's not very happy about looking back on his busier days. So he's super excited to get started, and he'll be doing the DISC profile. We'll start off with having him really envision what the ideal future looks like in 5 and 10 years. And most people don't do that very often, but that supplies the power for change.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, changes everything. It can make all the difference in the world there. What have we talked about that you do over there and how you do it?
Maybe give a little bit, it would help to give kind of a composite case study, if you will.
Yeah.
And you folks listening, you may recognize that somebody who kind of sounds like this. So let's imagine a dental practice. It's called Crown Point Dental. And the dentist is named Dennis. And if you know anything about dentistry, it won't surprise you to learn that his wife is the office manager, Denise.
Oh.
And it started off as a family-run business. It's grown quite a bit. They've got 30 employees now, multiple hygienists, 3 dentists. He's paying for state-of-the-art equipment. And Dennis is normally a pretty easygoing guy, but he feels buried and he feels guilty, partly because of how hard his wife, Denise, is working.
Oh, wow.
She's stressed from managing, more than she ever thought she would. And in particular, their pain points are that there's sort of a lack of leadership structure. One of their star performing hygienists is threatening to leave due to burnout. Insurance reimbursements are slow, and payroll is a real problem for her as well. So through the coaching process, they clarified their vision and they did the DISC assessments to improve communication. Dennis started carving out time to do strategic planning. They redefined their roles and did some delegation, put better financial systems in place.
Delegation.
And so after about a year, less stress, more time off, better morale, and pretty happy with the whole process.
Wow. It's interesting how delegation is a real important factor in that as well, right?
Yeah, and it's a founder's trap.
Founder's trap. I love that.
The founder's trap that you're successful because you're a great technician and you do everything and you make sure everything's perfect, but you can't keep that up forever. And a lot of people, I confess, sometimes me too, I think nobody can do it better than me, so why would I delegate it? But it's super important to not only delegate, but empower your people to be successful. I'm curious on your insight, Chris, on I mean, are you a good delegator? You've grown your business so well, you must be.
I mean, yeah, but I'm also bad. I mean, my history is bad at it. I think I hopefully have learned a few things, but still, I mean, even to this day, there's times where I look at something and well, this needs to go to a VA. I need to quit doing this, and I'm pretty good at constantly asking myself, is this something I should be delegating, and also trying to see the big picture. So I think I am at this point. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, maybe I wasn't as good, or 10 years ago. I'm getting better. But, it's still that there's something about the human touch of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I like to interact with and touch. There's, sometimes people will be like, are we talking to you, or are we talking to a VA, or who are we talking to on this email, or, some sort of form of communication.
Right.
And initially, there's marketing that the VAs do. But usually when I'm talking to clients or prospective clients, I usually want to have that personal thing there, and they're kind of always surprised. I'm talking to you, and I'm like, yeah, but that's because it's important to me, and a customer is important to me, and I kind of come from that old Tom Peters, something of excellence. What is it? It's a commitment to excellence era, and that's kind of the beginning of building a relationship. To me, it's like an important factor. But for the most part, I try and look at a lot of different things and be like, how can things be handled? But I think I'm always going to have, there's certain things I want to have close to the vest. I want to have customers to be able to talk to me. I want to have, I don't want to feel like that they can't get to me or be alienated. I didn't mind usually when calls came to the office and they want to talk to the boss, the president, because something wrong. And I didn't mind fixing their problems. And usually right away they'd get the attitude that, yeah, delegation is hard for a lot of self-employed people. It just is.
And then you have to do it effectively. I mean, one of the things that I've learned about my own leadership style is that I will sometimes over-delegate, but not provide clear instructions or support for how to get the job done.
Nah.
Because I think, we hire good people. The process.
They should be able to figure this out. They'll be able to psychically know what I want them to do. Yeah, we're all guilty of that.
Exactly.
I've seen that movie. But yeah, any final thoughts to tease out about the book and the service you offer before we go?
I am working on my next book, which is called, Sales is Not a Dirty Word. Mm-hmm. And this is for healthcare practitioners and professional services, lawyers, accountants, whatever, people who, as we talked about at the opening, for whatever reason, they're ambivalent about sales or they're ashamed of it. But that is the way, in fact, that they provide their services to their clients. So we help people get out of their own way by being really clear about what their values are and aligning their behavior with those values. So I think we were talking about it earlier. We like to say that the first sale you make is to yourself. I have to believe what I'm saying, so I better say the things that I believe. Mm-hmm. And then the second sale in our business is when our client grasps that vision of the future that he or she wants and says, yes, I'm compelled to take steps. So in our world, those are kind of the two things that happen.
Wow. So as we go out, give people a pitch, tell us how they can onboard you, what websites they can go to, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So my email is mhawk, Hawk, at focalpointcoaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under Matt Hawk, PhD. My last book is on Amazon. And my website is matthawk with 2 T's, .focalpointcoaching.com.
It's been fun to have you on the show and very insightful, and sales is everything. We're always selling to each other, so it's good to learn these things. And the great thing about sales, too, is once you learn how to be a good salesman, it's a trade that you can use in anything. Whether you're trying to convince your wife to marry you, or whether you're trying to convince someone to buy something, or selling maybe your car or someone else's car or dealership's car. And there's a lot of great stuff that you can do there. It's such a great skill to learn. And then once you have it, you can utilize it so many different ways. Starting your own company, sales, all that good stuff. So thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss and all those crazy places on the internet, and you can see us. Order Matt's book, Where Refined Books Are Sold. Next Level Sales Coaching, How to Build a Sales Team That Stays, Sells, and Succeeds, out July 2nd, 2020. That's really important, because if you have great salespeople and they leave, it can be really painful. I mean, most of my top guys were guys that could never have afford to leave because they made so much money from me and them. And anytime one of them left, they were almost irreplaceable, and they almost cost you the farm sometimes.
Yeah.
The top guys are really good. But yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Chris.